Anxiety. There's no doubt that every human being experiences it from time to time, sometimes at levels that are more or less unbearable, and other times just modestly behind the surface of the mind, resting there, creating some level of discomfort, but not interfering in our day. It would be helpful if we could understand a few things about how to manage anxiety, especially those things which make use of yoga tools that are particularly helpful and powerful in doing that. In order to use yoga practice to manage anxiety, we have to be able to recognize the nature of anxiety. And a simple way of seeing that is that anxiety is a negative emotion, an unpleasant emotion. That unpleasant emotion is related to the future, not the past. That is, I worry that some danger might happen in the future. The water may rise, the bugs may infest the field, I may be late to my daughter's dance recital. Something might happen in the future, and in that process I become anxious. The thing which might happen is my fear. So anxiety is caused by a fear. How is it possible to manage that negative emotion? How do I bring some order to the chaos I feel when I feel so upset and anxious? Well, one way is to examine the breath. And to do that, I need to understand just a little bit about breathing. Breathing is normally the result of metabolic need. Breathing causes us to breathe involuntarily in order to maintain life. So one source of breathing is the recognition inside us that we need to breathe to stay alive. That is called involuntary breathing or metabolic breathing. We also, however, have the capacity to breathe voluntarily. Voluntary breathing allows us to sip water through straws, to play the clarinet, to blow out birthday candles, or most importantly, to speak. So, when you're working with voluntary breathing, speech and other obvious ways in which we manipulate the breath supersede involuntary breathing briefly. If you try to hold your breath for 10 seconds, you can easily do it. If you try to hold your breath for 10 minutes, however, involuntary breathing asserts itself and says, sorry buddy, can't do that. So the nature of breathing is something which is both involuntary and primarily driven by metabolic need, as well as voluntary. However, there's another force that has an effect on breathing as well. That force is sometimes called non-voluntary breathing. And non-voluntary breathing is something like this. I'm anxious, suddenly startled by something, or perhaps I'm particularly sad, or I find myself in love. Breathing is subtle. Just different styles of breathing affect us in different ways. But anxious breathing restricts, constricts breathing. And in that restrictive, constrictive way, it drives breathing to become uncomfortable and supports the feeling of anxiety that is already present from our fear. The key strategy to begin to work with anxiety is to relax the breath. And we have the ability to relax the breath because we can learn to breathe voluntarily. So a good start when you're feeling anxious is to be able to lie down, close your eyes, or even just sit in a nice Barca lounger with one of those cranks on the side that you can lean back and close your eyes. breathe in such a way for about 6 or 7 minutes that you regain the feeling of relaxed metabolic breathing, the breath that's flowing naturally and smoothly. So to make this kind of simple, when you are feeling anxious, your anxiety becomes coupled to breathing and disturbs it. You can change that. You can, by your own skill, relax your breathing and uncouple your anxiety from your normal breath. That's the first step in managing anxiety. What's the second step? It's helpful to have a relaxation method, something that you can do that doesn't require a lot of mental effort. It's always the case that practice is money in the bank. By keeping up a regular relaxation practice, you can relax yourself at times of stress even more effectively. So, a regular relaxation practice, something that you do each day, can be combined with your breath awareness to make you even more relaxed and less vulnerable to anxiety episodes. But there are other layers of self. Of course, our anxiety stems from fears which are deep-seated sometimes. And we have to get some method for adjusting ourselves and working with these deep-seated fears. One method is to use a mantra. A mantra is a resting place, not only for your emotional life, but for your mind. A place which you can use to go to quiet fears. The mantra Soham, used with breathing, is one of those powerful mantras that is also quite simple. It means, I am who I am. And in thinking about that, contemplating the idea that I am who I am, I quietly bring a source of joy and comfort and strength to my own inner life. Finally, after breathing, relaxation, and mantra, we do need to also be realistic, that some of our fears are real fears, and they have a certain propensity to overwhelm us, to undo our normal thoughts, and create a sense of anxiety, distress, disorganization, and fear, increased fear. So in working with ourselves at that level, it may be helpful to us, first of all, to practice trustful surrender. Trustful surrender that life is not meant for our distress, that even this distress is meant for our upliftment. And so I begin to reduce the level of my fear from a 9 to an 8, from an 8 to a 6, from a 6 to a 4. I take small steps, reducing the intensity of my fear by understanding something more about fear. That this fear is a passing process. It's something that I can work with as it passes through. And in the end, perhaps, I may even treat it as the wind, passing through a space, but no longer its permanent residence. Fears come and go. By accepting them, by recognizing that they do come and go, sometimes accelerating and sometimes decelerating, I begin to recognize that I have some degree of control over my own fear and anxiety. And once I've begun to sense that, then these steps, breathing, relaxation, mantra, and contemplation, will help me to reduce the level of chronic anxiety and give me a sense of confidence in my own control. That's the path of yoga.